Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dead Rabbit Radio. I'm your host, Jason Carpenter. I'm having a great day. I hope you're having a great day too. We have a lot to cover today because we're doing 3 stories on 3 different towns. So I want to jump right into it. Now, this is related to an episode I did recently, Ariana Grande and the 7 Gateways to Hell. Now, when I released that episode, I had a lot of fun recording that episode. I have a lot of fun recording all of them, but that one was particularly entertaining to me. When I posted it up on YouTube, I had a YouTube commenter named Rising Vapor hit me up and says, hey, I know of a couple other towns that are similar to the town of Stoll, Kansas. And so he sent me some resources. He basically said, here's a couple of information for town, enough for me to track them down. And so we are going to take a tour of these towns in America that may or may not be haunted. We will discuss that as we get into it now. Normally we take the Carpenter copter, but I figure we're in America. There's no point to have to get in and the helicopter is a Boeing 347. I looked it up. That's a helicopter with the wings. So if you're ever curious of what the Carpenter copter looks like, it is a Boeing 347. All 2 of you out there who are like, what's it look like? And I'm one of them. It's a Boeing 347. But anyways, Carpenter copter we're going to just leave grounded for today. And I know a lot of people are disappointed. Now, we have the Carpenter copter for our air travel, international. Can helicopters fly over oceans? I guess I should have checked that out. So, we have the Carpenter copter for international travel. We have the Rabbit rowboat that if we're going to islands or, again, over oceans. And I was like, I need a car. And I came up with a couple different ones. So I needed a land vehicle to, we're just driving around town. So that is why I want all of you to hop on board the Jason Jalopy. I want you to picture it looking like a steam-powered, old-timey car a la Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but probably less cool. So let's all hop into the Jason Jalopy. It makes all sorts of weird noises. It sounds like it's going to die at any moment, and it might. But it's still a reliable vehicle. Now, Rising Vapor has sent us on this quest to check out these 3 towns. So the first place we're taking the Jason Jalopy to is a little town called Dudleytown. Now, Dudleytown is in the state of Connecticut, the beautiful state of Connecticut, I'm assuming. I've never been there. I just imagine there's like leaves and people named William and Buffy and Stella and Stuart. They're drinking tea. And they see a car of, hooligans show up, and they're like, show us your ghost, show us your ghost. And they're like, oh my, I don't know what to do. Call the authorities, Martha. And then the authorities come out, and they, what are you looking for? And they're like, I'm looking for ghosts. Now, Dudleytown was called... Okay, so let me back up here. Dudleytown, brief overview. It was founded in the 1700s. By the 1800s, it was abandoned. The forest grew up around it. It used to be farmland, and it just wasn't great farmland, so people move away. That tends to happen. In the 1920s, this dude writes a book called The History of Cornwall, and he says, Dudleytown has had a string of bad luck. This guy went insane, and this guy killed his family, and a bunch of Indians came in and killed these kids, and a bunch of people disappeared. The end, it was just like an anecdote in a book. And he didn't say anything supernatural was going on. He just said this is a string of bad luck. Rumors started to swirl. One of the rumors was that Dudleytown was founded by a guy who betrayed King Henry VII or whatever, and the curse was brought over because English kings are known for putting curses on people, but that was a rumor that started. The rumor started that just the land was cursed, and then it became that the land was haunted, the area itself was haunted. Dan Aykroyd, a literal ghostbuster, and he's actually really big into paranormal research, but Dan Aykroyd's an actual ghostbuster. He said Dudleytown is the most haunted place on Earth. Quite the boast. I think even in the intro I said the most haunted place in America. Dan Aykroyd, I was selling it short. Dan Aykroyd said it was the most haunted place on Earth. Now, before the History of Cornwall was written, long before Dan Aykroyd was talking about it being the most haunted place on Earth, after the town of Dudleytown was abandoned, the town was bought by basically the people who still lived there. And they was bought in the name of this group that is one of the most ominously named groups that I can think of outside of Cobra or Umbrella Corporation. Actually, those names aren't as scary as this one, the Dark Entry Forest Association. What? Now, their name comes from a forest near Dudleytown, that's part of it, called the dark entry forest, because apparently the way that the mountains are situated, the forest is always dark because of like the shade or something. Maybe they're lit up during the noon, but I mean, for the most part, they're in the dark. Why don't you just call yourself the DEFA, the DEFA? Why the Dark Entry Forest Association? They bought this land up in the 1920s, so the whole area is private land. You can't visit it, you can't take your ghost crew there, you can't traipse through it with your EMF or your spirit box or none of that stuff. They shut it down to the point that if you're driving down the road, people have reported this, that if they're driving down the road and they stop or they slow down, cops show up. People in the area are constantly watching for ghost hunters or teenagers or whatever and calling up the Connecticut State Police like they have nothing better to do than patrol this area, catching the ghost crew or whatever. Dark Entry Forest Association guards this area so zealously that to me that actually raises more questions. If I had just seen this place and it was like, oh, this place, Connecticut, had a string of bad luck, Dan Aykroyd said it was the most haunted place on earth, I'd be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But the fact that there's a group that's actively like suppressing people from investigating it, it just seems odd. Now, there was a report that there was a Christian-based movie production company that wanted to do a movie on Dudleytown. And for whatever reason, it sounds so bizarre, but the director, the producers got 6 screenwriters, put them in a house in Dudleytown, and they're like, write a script. What? But it sounds like a mix-up of a bad reality show and a horror movie. But anyways, the 6 writers were sitting in there trying to write on the script. A bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff happened with the movie, producers arguing and things like that. One of the things, according to this article, was that the Dark Entry Forest Association threatened to sue the filmmakers for defamation if they made this horror movie based on their town. That is aggressive debunking. They've come out, I mean, if you go and you look up Dark Entry Forest or Dudleytown, most of the first links are, our town isn't haunted, our town isn't haunted, our town isn't haunted, please stay away. And one of the things said, how would you feel if you were sitting in your house and you saw a bunch of teenagers walk outside throwing beer cans and setting fires? Well, I wouldn't feel too good, but if I knew they were there because they thought it was the most haunted place on earth, I wouldn't mind because I would charge them $5. I would open it up and say, $5, $10. I mean, it's the most haunted place on earth. And again, we talked about this with the Ariana Grande thing. Stoll, Kansas is like, do not come here. There's no ghosts. Roswell says, please come here. There's aliens. And Roswell is a booming economy, tourist economy. And Stoll, Kansas is just this little town in the middle of nowhere. Now, I'm going to stereotype Connecticutans, people who live in Connecticut, Connecticut's. I'm going to stereotype Connecticut's, and I'm going to assume they're all just wealthy, so they don't care. They don't need the extra money, and they don't need the money. Again, they're just sipping, drinking tea. Teenagers are kind of like Archie and Jughead are like running around in the backyard, and they're like, ugh. But the pushback is what makes the story suspicious. The pushback actually is what makes the story interesting. Because there's hundreds of supposed cursed towns and ghost towns and stuff like that across America and over the globe. But the fact that you have a group that's so aggressively trying to debunk it actually makes me more suspicious that something actually happened there or is happening here today. Who knows? I mean, it could just be that they got tired of teenagers like knocking over their crumpets and like driving motorcycles over their doilies and stuff like that. That's the most logical answer. But again, sometimes it's not. The story itself can be fairly bland. It's the little meta details behind the story that make it more suspicious. So, we'll rate these. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much would I want to visit Dudleytown? I don't know. It sounds kind of pompous. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of meat to the story. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say probably a 4. I wouldn't even waste my gas driving to Dudleytown. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.